Hey guys, today I'm going to be planting some flowering bulbs. I'm hoping to get around 200 of them either in the ground or in raised beds today. And I'll just give you a quick little haul of what I have here. I like to plant my bulbs pretty late in the year, and that is simply because I like to wait until all of the bulbs are on sale at Walmart, Lowe's, Home Depot, all of those big box stores that you can normally get these at. So I have this huge haul of bulbs here. I probably took like half of what was left at our local Walmart because everything was 50% off. So I'll just show you a quick little look at what I have. I've got some double daffodils here, and I have 20 of those. Then I have a whole bunch of tulips, and I'm going to be planting these in one of our vegetable raised beds. And I'm going to be doing it in like a flower farming style, so they're going to be planted very closely together, and I'm going to treat them as annuals. So I have a bunch of different varieties here. I have some white ones, 20 of those. Then I have some solid red ones, 24 of those. And then there were some red ones that have like yellow highlighting along the edges. So I have a bag of those. And then this one also has yellow, but it's a little bit different. It has a little bit more yellow feathered throughout it. 10 of those. Then I have a mix of all different colors. And I have a package of those. Then I have another package of daffodils. This one is a white daffodil with an orange center. And then I also bought a few packages of just like smaller kinds of bulbs. So I have some Dutch irises here. 50 bulbs for $5. What a steal. And these ones are smaller bulbs, so I'm hoping that those will go really quickly. And then I also have some muscari, also known as grape hyacinth. 20 of those. And then some crocuses, which are classic spring flower, first thing that you usually see blooming. For these smaller bulbs, I am planning on planting these around some fig trees that we have on our property just to spruce up the area a little bit and add some spring color. So everything that I showed you so far is what I'm going to try and get planted today. I also have another few things that we're not going to be planting today, but I'll just show you what I have. I have some more daffodils. This is another variety that has a white outside and then a colored center. So this one has like a bright yellow one. And we have 20 of those. And then we have 70 of these ice folly daffodils, which are Aaron's favorite. And I'm hoping to fill in our front yard with a ton of these. We planted some of these last year, and it'll be good to just add in some more to fill in more space. So for these 70 bulbs, we paid $10, which is amazing. And then lastly, I found some alliums. This was the only package they had, otherwise I would have bought more because I really love allium flowers. These are purple sensations, which are a pretty common one, and we have 15 of those. And I find that bees really love allium flowers, so they're a great thing to plant for pollinators. So anyway, that is a quick little haul, and now I'll show you the areas that we're going to be planting. Here we are in our vegetable raised bed garden. I actually want to do a tour soon because even though it is the middle of November, there's still so much going on in the garden right now, and it was actually hard for me to figure out which bed to plant in because there's pretty much something going on in every single bed. By the way, Aaron is working on our patio, so sorry if you hear him hammering or malleting. But anyway, this first bed was the only one where I had a space that was cleared out enough that I am going to use for the tulips. I have 70 tulip bulbs, give or take, maybe like 75, and I am sure that I'm going to be able to fit them in just this half of the bed. It doesn't look like a lot, but when you plant tulips in the way that I'm going to show you, you can fit a lot of tulips in a very small amount of space. I'm starting off by making a really wide trench on this side of the bed. So I'm removing as much of the soil as possible so that I'm a few inches down from the top of the soil line. And all of these tulip bulbs are going to be planted very closely together. The reason that I'm doing it this way and why I'm doing it in a raised bed is because these tulips are going to be treated as annuals, which is how they normally are treated when you are a flower farmer. There are a lot of reasons for this. One of them is that tulips do not really come back very reliably. Some varieties come back better than others, but even still, every year you will have a little bit of a decline. So the first year, if you get 100% of them to bloom, the next year you might get 50 to 70%, and it's just not worth having that space to leave them there. So when I go to harvest them in the spring, I'm going to pull them up the whole plant, bulbs and all, and this is how I did it for the first time last year, and I just treated them as an annual cut flower. Another reason is that space is more valuable than the bulbs. So by removing the entire plant, you can make sure that you can plant something else in the same area rather than leaving the bulbs in that precious real estate. And this is one of the reasons why I'm planting it in our vegetable raised beds, because we do have a large cut flower garden and I could plant it there. But since these are going to be pulled out by May, that leaves plenty of time for me to be able to use this bed still for any vegetables that we need for the season. Another reason that I'm planting it in our vegetable garden rather than in our cut flower garden is because this is closer to our house and it's easier to monitor, and we'll also be able to enjoy looking at the flowers more. Being able to monitor these is more important for tulips than for other bulbs because they are prone to more pest damage from deer, squirrels, rabbits. A lot of animals just really like munching on either the flowers and the foliage or digging up the actual bulbs. So I wanted to put it in a place where I could keep an eye on them. Last year we did have some deer come and eat some of our tulips, so I really had to make sure I went and covered them with frost fabric every night to make sure any deer that came around would not be able to reach the tulips. And that's kind of a pain, so I'm hoping that by having these closer to the house, the deer will be deterred from coming here. And I do have some hoops set up that I can cover these bulbs for more protection as well. Now that my trench is pretty much ready and dug out, I am just opening up all my packages and I'm going to try and keep these tulips grouped generally by color because they might have different bloom times. So I want to be able to pick these in the order that they're blooming and just have them all grouped nicely together. But other than that, I'm not going to label or anything because I'm not really growing that many and I don't really care if they get too mixed up. One thing I did notice when I was opening up these packages is that a couple of the packages did have bulbs that were a little bit rotted or dried out. So that's just one thing to keep in mind, especially if you are going and looking for these deals at the end of the season. Try and take a look inside the packages to make sure that the bulbs are okay. I did try and do it with most of these packages, but since I bought so many bulbs, I must have missed a couple and didn't check them all. It's not really that big a deal because most of them are fine. And I'll just plant the ones that don't look great anyway, and if they don't grow, then they'll just compost in the ground here. I'm going to be adding some bulb tone to the area that I'm planting these tulips. I don't really think this is necessary just because they're going to be in the ground for such a short amount of time. So I am going a little light on this, but worst comes to worst, we're going to use this area for our vegetables anyway. And even though this is called bulb tone, it's still a pretty nice all-purpose general fertilizer that will continue to feed the soil after these tulips are done. When you're planting these bulbs, make sure you have the pointy side facing up so that the bulbs can grow as easily as possible. And you should be able to see the bottom where the roots are going to be coming out of. And you'll see that I'm placing these tulips very close together. This is a lot closer than how you would plant it if you were planting this out in your yard or landscape. And the reason we're able to do this is because they are going to be pulled up, and since they're annuals, they don't really need a lot of space to grow around them. And this way you can fit a lot of bulbs in a very small amount of space, and it also makes planting really fast. At first, it sounds like it will take a long time to plant 75 or 100 tulip bulbs, but this is probably the quickest part of all the bulbs that I'm planting today, just because I'm able to dig that one big trench and fit all of these bulbs really easily into that space. A lot of times when people plant their bulbs this way, they compare it to how eggs would look in a carton, so that's about the kind of spacing that you want for these bulbs. Here are the 75 or so tulip bulbs that I finished planting. They took up even less space than I thought they would, so really you can fit so many tulips into a raised bed if that's all the space that you have. And I think this is going to be really beautiful in the spring. Here's a close-up of how closely together they're spaced, and again, you don't need to worry about them needing more space than this. So now it's time to cover them all up. In the end, you want your bulbs to be 3 to 6 inches underneath the soil, and the soil in this raised bed has settled quite a bit, so I am also going to be topping this with some wood chips that will also act as a nice mulch, which is especially nice if you live in a colder climate. You could also use shredded leaves if you want. I know a lot of people this time of year like to use shredded leaves as a top dress or mulch for their beds because that will break down nicely into compost. I personally don't like to use leaves in our raised beds because we did have quite a big slug problem last spring and I couldn't get hardly anything to grow when I direct sowed it. Anything that germinated was immediately eaten by slugs and it was super annoying, and I think that the leaves harbor slugs pretty badly, so I'm sticking to wood chips. Last year when I grew my tulips, they were planted basically just in wood chips and they grew just fine. So I'm not worried about them being able to come through the wood chips. And here's what it looks like, all nice and pretty with that wood mulch on top. I always like how finished an area looks after you add the mulch on top. And now that those tulips are done, I can move on to the next area where I'm going to be planting the rest of the bulbs. Here's the next area I'm going to be working on. I don't know if you can really see it because all the leaves have fallen, but we do have a fig tree here. This is a pretty new fig tree, so it is quite small right now. But I want to make this into a nice little space so that it's not just like a tree in the middle of nowhere, and just make it a little pretty. So I'm planning on planting some of the bulbs that are going to come back year after year in this area so that they can naturalize well and just make almost like a nice little meadow here. Again, here are the bulbs that I'm planning on planting here. There are over 100, but a lot of them are pretty small, so I'm hoping this will go pretty quickly. So I've got these Dutch irises. I think this is like a shorter, smaller variety. Then we have our crocuses and the muscari. I also want to plant these double daffodils here because I really like double daffodils, and this is a nice spot that we can see from the house. So I want to be able to enjoy these. And then if we have space or if I have time to get to it, I might also pop in some of these daffodils. That's the variety name there. So let's see how this goes. Just a quick little note for anyone wondering how late you can plant your bulbs. I think that as long as your ground is workable and it hasn't frozen yet, it's not too late to plant your bulbs. It doesn't matter if you've already had a frost or not, because bulbs are very hardy. In fact, a lot of them actually need a nice cold period in order for them to bloom properly. So I wouldn't worry about it being too cold. The only thing I'd worry about is actually if you live in too warm a climate, because I do know that some bulbs, since they require that cold period, you might need to buy your bulbs pre-chilled and then they might not come back year after year. So that's something to look into if you are in a warmer zone. Another thing I wanted to mention is that besides tulips, I do think that most bulbs are pretty resistant to a lot of pests like deer and squirrels. For example, a lot of the ones that I'm planting in this area are resistant. Things like daffodils are a great one, and also hyacinths, alliums. Most animals don't tend to want to eat or dig those up. So if you live in an area where those are common issues, then those might be a good selection of bulbs for you to look into planting. Since these bulbs are going to be staying in the ground and coming back hopefully year after year, I am spacing them a little farther apart than I did the tulips. So I'm trying to follow more of the normal spacing where each bulb has a few inches of space around it. I kind of go off of the size of the bulb and try to have like 2 or 3 times the size of the bulb around it. And some of these bulbs will also multiply over time, so I'm hoping that they will fill up this space really nicely. I've got pretty much everything planted. Here is the before shot, and here's what it looks like after. In the end, I ended up planting the crocuses around here, the muscari here. I had a pretty big drift of irises going curving around this way, and in front of that I have the double daffodils around here. All of these are going to bloom in the spring, but they will kind of bloom at different times in the spring, from early to late. So I'm hoping that this is going to look good for a good part of the season with all of the different kinds of bulbs that I planted today. Obviously you can see that I've also mulched up with a bunch of wood chips, and that just makes it so that we know where everything's planted, and so that when Aaron mows he can just go around this spot instead of over it. And I think it just makes everything look really nice and neat. Thank you guys for watching. Please subscribe for more videos like this, and we'll see you again in the next one.